So, yeah, I went to an Al-Anon meeting, and I've asked my husband to make sure it's okay if I, say whatever I kind of want to here, and he said absolutely. He's an open book. I'm an open. We're just open books. So, but he was having some issues with alcohol, and so I was having issues with him. And it really started not being fun. And he also has some mental health things going on too. So, and that's a really bad mixture. So I did go to an Al-Anon meeting, and it was awesome. It was awesome. I think one of my biggest takeaways from that meeting is the fact that I always have this idea, if you loved me enough, you'd stop.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? And how much guilt is in that statement? Right? Because then you go out and, or my husband goes out and has another drink, and he comes home, you don't love me anymore. That's not the truth. The truth is the addiction in his eyes and what he tells me. And he used to go to AA. He's done that for years, and, has read I think they call it the Big Book, the AA book. And he knows it like inside and out. That was his study guide, and I went every day for like 4 years. But he will say it's a disease, and the disease has absolutely nothing to do with his love for me or lack of love for me, and vice versa. We have to be careful. The one that's having the issue has to understand it's not about, well, if you loved me enough, I could quit. Neither one of those work, because it's a chemical, it's an imbalance. It's its own disease.
And to make the chemical thing understandable for some, because I know for some people that's really hard to understand, right? So, but think of it like this, not to throw women under the bus, but menopause, okay? If you think about menopause, what happens? Chemical imbalance, right? Chemical change. What happens?
Yeah.
You get moody. You get hot, you get cold, you don't know what's happening, and just, right? Same thing when there's a chemical change.
Mm-hmm.
And so by trying to stop doing whatever their addiction is, a chemical change is then happening, which is part of what the freak out is. So if you think of it like menopause, like, okay, they're quitting that, they're going to be menopausal for a month. We're just going to keep that in here, and it's going to make it more tolerable for you, because it's easier to understand if you've never been there.
Yeah.
We all know a woman that has gone through menopause,
Yeah.
but not everybody has experienced that side of addiction. And so for some, that may feel very foreign of a concept.
Yeah. Yep. So you don't ever want to equate, the addiction with love.
So making sure to not hold that guilt is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. On both
And
parts.
it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to be upset.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, the flip of that, so I don't want my husband to feel guilty and throw out, you don't love me anymore. But I also want to be real with him, and I do think it's important to let the other person know how it's affecting you and how you're feeling about it. Mm-hmm. But I also understand that, if I share how that makes me feel, and how it's affecting me, there's certainly that can cause guilt as well. Right?
And know that there's a chance that they might get defensive as well, because they might already be feeling that guilt, and they might hit a point where they can't feel any worse about themselves, so they have to get defensive. And understand that that doesn't mean that you're necessarily attacking them. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily doing anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But do understand that the more gentle that you are able to be with them,
Mm-hmm.
the easier it'll be for them to hear you.
Yep. Yeah.
Because if my other half looked at me and was like, well, you're freaking stupid because you smoke, I'd be like, well, you're a freaking butthole because your opinion is so bold. I wouldn't even hear his message. But if he looked at me and goes, I'm really concerned about your smoking, cancer runs in your family, I'd be like, crap, you got a point. So the wording definitely does make an impact as to how well they will hear you.
Yeah. And that's hard because, when major addiction, so when I say major addictions, I just mean when it's spilling out into other main parts of your life and is really becoming problematic. What do you do in those? What do you do when it gets? I mean, when Symphony's smoking, because for me it doesn't bother me.
I'm not blowing it in her face. I'm not.
Yeah, and I know there's cancer in the family, and confession, I smoke too. So, and have tried to quit and have made good successes. I quit for like 10 years and then took it up again when I met my husband, because he was a smoker, and so I just thought it would be cute and smoke one with them. Yeah,
I didn't know that was what it was.
Oh yeah, yep. So,
I was just mad.
Yeah, it is. Now, the first time I started, though, I was anxious. I was away from home, and I was just really hating on life. And I had heard that cigarettes calm you, so I went for it, and then smoked for like 10 years. But anyway, back to the subject.
What she's trying to say is when she says, the major addiction, she's referring more to like, all right, so you're not going to play video games and overdose on video games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the only way that's happening is if you literally starve yourself, but that's still not an overdose, that's starvation. So it's like, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
you can go and use meth once and be dead.
Yeah.
And I think she's referring more to the addictions that can have such a drastic and immediate impact.
Yeah.
That are completely life-changing for so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you're doing heavy drugs or alcohol or these kinds of things, they change you behaviorally. I mean, addictions in and of themselves do. Like I said, retail therapy, I'm okay. I'm starting to get stressed. Oh, I need some therapy. And then, woo, I feel great. And then, you get your bottom, but it's still, we can oftentimes kind of manage it and get ourselves in trouble, but
come back from it by working extra hours.
Yeah, but some of these things, alcohol, for example, I'll use what I know and what's my experience.
Fentanyl is a big one in the community right now.
Very scary.
I helped somebody get clean from fentanyl, so that's more my experience.
And that's her experience, yeah. But they change. It's like, I know my husband's in there somewhere, but
you only get little glimpses. It's like they're peeking at you from a window shade. Like, they're there, but like, what are you doing in there? Like,
yeah.
Can you answer the door?
Yep.
I'm cold out here.
Yeah. So what do we do when the behaviors change, right? And they think they're fine, but you from the other side, you're being yelled at, or maybe something's being thrown at you, or it becomes...
or it could go the other way and they see the walls breathing and they think they're fine, but you're like, dude, there's no way.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I mean, so when it gets that kind of serious, where maybe an intervention is is necessary, because you can't go on the way you are. You, the one watching, or the one that's actually going through it? At what point, and how do you decide, and who decides, and how does that all play itself out?
And unfortunately, a lot of people wait too long, and it's after something serious happens. Like, I've seen a lot of people in the community, people that I know have encountered or known some of these people that when they are going through their addiction, the person or people will wait until, say, they, like, I don't know, accidentally injure their kid, or their wife is in the hospital, or their husband's in the hospital, or they've crashed their car because they were driving high or drunk or whatever. And it's after that major incident that they try to do the intervention. But at that point, sometimes then the guilt from the incident itself is so immense that the intervention winds up not being as effective as it could have been had you reached it pre-guilt, if that makes sense. And that's not necessarily anybody's fault, because it is hard to sit down with someone you love, know you're about to piss them off, and have this discussion with them. But at the same time, it could be one of the best things you ever do for them and for yourself. Like, especially depending on, like, for example, okay, say that mom was addicted to heroin or something. Like, yeah, it's going to be really hard for me to sit down and be like, so mom, what? But especially being who she is, but it's going to be even harder to have to see her 6 feet under because I didn't do that. Or at least knowing that I didn't try. And that's something else to keep in mind too. See, the way I worded that was wrong. It wouldn't be because I didn't do that. She made her own choice at that point, right? So there's a lot of people that guilt themselves about that later on. Like, God, what if I would have? What if I would have? What if I would have? But you need to let that go too.
Yeah.
Like, whatever happened because of the addiction happened. It doesn't mean that you directly made the pieces fall the way they did. And again, back to the whole only human scenario. It's I actually just helped someone through that too, that they felt that someone's OD was partially their fault, and it was because they didn't answer a phone call. And I helped them work through that, because at the end of the day, them not answering the phone didn't put the needle in the arm.
Right.
It didn't buy the drug. She was placing her boundary where it was needed, which you need to be okay with, right? But then when something that big happens, it's hard to be okay with that decision. And you have to remember and be able to separate, detach, like, what is the proper, how do you word that? Like, you got to be able to understand that you were not the direct breaking link, if that makes sense, and you can't hold that over yourself. Or over them,
or for them. I mentioned this a while back with my uncle committed suicide, and he was drinking heavy. He was serious. He was very drunk when he did it, but he was having issues with that. I mean, he'd been an alcoholic probably for years, and certain family members had tried to talk him through that or talk him out of that. I don't think anybody maybe said, hey, go get yourself clean. But he's responsible, because he did try to call a family member, and a family member had probably the same thing. I think she was putting her own boundary in place. He's called, can't tell you how many times he's called, not just that night, but over
a span of years.
And she just finally, it was like, what, I can't do this anymore. He's got to do this himself. And then he, he shot himself, and absolutely we can feel guilty for that. But we have to realize and understand healing happens here. not out there. It is not my responsibility to make sure she stops smoking.
Yep.
It is her
She can tell me all day that I can do it, but until I decide I can do it, those are just words to me.
Yep. Yep. And it's my job to not let her infringe on my own happiness. So my own happiness is, guess whose job? Mine. Not Siphone's. So, you know, I can be there for Siphony when she's, you know, having a rough day and all that, but when I hang up the phone, it is my job to get back to my own sense of peace.
And don't get me wrong, there have been days that she's been like, I can't talk right now. I got my own crap I'm dealing with, and it's my job to respect that.
To respect that. Yeah. I don't know how well we're taught that. At least in my family, we weren't.
Well,
let us know what
they
your
might not have been,
like.
but she taught me well.
Yes, because you know me growing up in a family that everybody is so, you know, it's all this intertwined, and there was no such thing as a boundary, or at least not boundaries the way I understand them.
They are one in a whole, not an individual. I think that's a good way to put it.
I think that's a very good way of putting it. You know, you weren't allowed to be your own individual. You had to do kind of what the group was doing, and if you didn't, you were, you know, ostracized and that kind of thing. But
for sure,
regardless, yeah, growing up that way and me being very uncomfortable and me having a very deep understanding of how different I was. So how many of you out there are black sheeps? let us know. Because you're welcome here. This is a room full of black sheeps. So as I was raising my children, I just didn't want to do that to them. So I did treat them the way that I wished I had been treated, and that is, you know, and I didn't always do it right. You know, we've had our issues.
But we got past them.
And a big reason for that is
understanding
and
respecting.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Or accepting, respecting. Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
Okay, so addictions.
Excuse me.
The one who's witnessing it needs to care for themselves. Okay, so
like if I, like her saying she can't take the call right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am keenly aware of when I can handle something and when I can't. So that was hard for me to learn, and took me many years, and I'm still working on it. I think it's one of those things that we come here with, and it's one of our major obstacles.
And I want to touch on that because a lot of people do have a hard time with that when a loved one is stuck in an addiction. It is hard to put a boundary down.
Oh, yes.
But at the end of the day, it is a necessary thing.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the more you'd be surprised at how well people honor it. So like, I have people that I know that every so often they slip and they go back to their addiction, and theirs is drugs, and they know not to come around me, not to talk to me, because I don't want to be around that.
Yeah.
And they respect that.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're silent, I just know they're being stupid, and it is what it is. And like, but I mean, I have my addiction. I'm being stupid every time I light a cigarette, so I'm not judging them for it.
Yeah.
I just go with the hope and that they'll get out of it, and the knowledge that they know that I love them still. But when I placed that boundary, there was no, oh, how could you? Like I expected there to be.
Yeah.
It was a full blown, oh dude, I got you. I totally understand.
Yeah.
That was it.
And I think that works in some ways. And for you, I mean, your history, many of your people have had a lot of these issues.
Yeah, I do tend to befriend the black sheep, the people that have been traumatized, the people that have been battered and beaten and have their own demons that they're facing.
Yeah, which I think is seriously cool that you grew up as, you guys understood that about each other, and I think you have in your life really created this wonderful kind of support system between all of you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For me, I didn't have that. I was like, I wasn't a black sheep. I was a lone wolf too. It was like I had to figure it out on
All
my
fronts.
own. Yeah. But I think that's really cool that you have that in your life. But
It does help.
it does. But I think for many people who are struggling with a loved one with addictions, they don't have it as well. I think a lot of times when people are struggling with addictions, I mean, who are they gonna come to? Who are they gonna try to hurt? Who are they gonna try to make fix? And that's usually a loved one.
Right.
And then that's where, oh my God, how do I manage this? Especially if they're living in your home. What do? Do you kick them out on the street? Do you not let them come in for the night, or
conduct daily room searches,
right?
Like, pocket checks.
Yeah,
what do you do?
Yeah, Tiffany's talking about these are relationships that she has grown and maintained, and that you've had the bulk of your life, but they're not living in your space.
Yes, correct.
So that's
so it's a lot easier for me to be like, don't come around till you're done.
Yeah,
because they don't live here.
Yeah. But it's scary because, you think if you tell your loved one no, or kick them out, or don't allow them in, where are they going to go?
Are they going to go deeper into it?
Are they going to go deeper in?
Are they going to go homeless?
Are they going to find a way? Yeah. So in our heart of hearts, I mean, what do we want the most is to protect, right? So, and oftentimes I think, well, at least, I know they're okay because they're still here, and so I'm gonna put up with it, and I'm gonna do my best with it. But in the long run, what are we doing?
That's where the boundaries matter, because say that you are protecting that person, but you have a small child in the home, and then something happens with the person that's on, whatever the addiction, and the child winds up affected by it. DHS is at your door.
Yeah.
Right? Then you're all directly affected, and you gotta not let it get that far. Like, you have to understand that your boundaries have a reason, but try to find the easiest way to place them.
Yeah.
Like don't just be like, get the hell out. Like,
Although,
maybe, if you came at him with maybe, try like, hey, I found these rehab centers first or something.
Sure.
Would you be willing to try to seek help? Try that first before you're like, get up out of here. Like, the more they see your compassion, the easier it's going to be for them to get off. And say they do say yes to that rehab center, it also tells them that you support them. So if they do get clean, they know you're one of the safe ones, because you're the one that helped them get there. They know that they can come to you when they're feeling like they have a craving, because they won't find it with you.
Yeah.
But they know that you didn't turn on them. It doesn't feel like you turned on them, I should say, because some people, it does feel that way
for a while.
Yeah. And so it helps to know that you have someone that you still feel safe with, and it may take time. Like, I have somebody that I helped off fentanyl, like I said, and it took some time before I heard back, and a lot of that was just the pure embarrassment that they felt. And so also keep in mind, if something like that does work and they go silent for a while, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, they were embarrassed, they were ashamed, they weren't ready to face me sober yet. Yeah. And that was okay, because I knew that they were getting help and that they were getting better. Yeah. I kind of went on a tangent, sorry.
No, that's okay. You were talking about it happening in front of your child, like when. So there's two people in this addiction process, or at least we're going to talk about it in terms of, because for me it was also Tiffany's dad for a while. Well, the whole time we were married. But wow, and I'm going to talk about this with as much grace as I can, because I think over the years he's made some, awesome progress, and I think, he and I were just kind of like oil and water. So, but I hid it from Tiffany. So until I couldn't hide it anymore. And that's when, so it was okay for me to be hurt, but
as long as I wasn't.
As long as she wasn't. But when it became apparent that she was old enough and it was becoming more apparent, anyway, there was a point in time that I realized, oh, I got to do something, because this is really affecting her. I wasn't a counselor yet. I hadn't even started school yet. Hindsight, later on down the road, I've had all this, training and understanding, deeper understanding. It was affecting her, even though not directly. It was affecting her indirectly, which is another kind of weird. It's a very deep, difficult subject to have. Because it is really scary, and you don't know when that person is done. Like my uncle, this time that's it, he's done, he's out of here. Could we have prevented that? Was that a time that we should have called?
I have two people that I considered family, that they weren't part of this family. But unfortunately they both drank too much, and it took them, and it still eats at me. But
yeah,
I still love them and I forgive them, but at the same time, like, I'm not gonna say it doesn't cross my mind, like, was there something that we could have said? Was there something we could have done? I mean, that question's always gonna be there, but I can't let it be the be all.